Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to Sunday school. Well, I'm going to start by putting on my gloves. Can any of you guess where I am right now? Anybody guess where I'm at? You guess? Well, hard to see because it's dark. But I had to wait until the wind died down a little bit to set up my tent. So I am in a tent, and it's a little chilly. Now, our next story that we're going on, how many of you have ever gone wandering before? Maybe your mom and dad have taken you on an adventure, and you just start to wander. All of a sudden, you're taking in the sights, the scenes, or you get distracted by an animal, but you're wandering. Have you ever wandered for 5 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe a day? Anybody wander for a month? Maybe 40 years? 40 years? I'm barely 40 years. But back in Jesus' time, they did. They wandered trusting God. And that's where our next story for the next couple weeks takes us, is into the wilderness, wandering the wilderness. Now, where they were, it was not Minnesota. It was warm. It was hot. And so they still had the tents, but obviously they didn't need winter accessories. But they did need protection from the sun. So we are going to read the story where they were wandering in the wilderness. And maybe some of you have heard this story. But it's about how it goes over about no matter what, God always gives us what we need. Not always what we want, but what we need. So let's go into the story. Manna, quail, and water. God loved the Israelites and their leader Moses. God promised to bring the people to a place where they could build homes and live happily. They had never lived outside of Egypt before, and they were afraid. It's understandable. But God went with them as they walked long and far to the place God promised. Traveling was hard and tiring. Along the way, people became hungry. They complained to Moses, "I'm so hungry," one boy cried. "I wish we could go back to Egypt," whined a little girl. "At least we had food to eat there," her stomach growled. The people missed their dinners of meat and bread. The Israelites didn't know that God heard them complaining. That evening, something strange happened. Tiny birds called quails appeared everywhere. God had sent the quails so people could eat meat. And that's kind of what a quail looks like. Maybe some of you have seen the quail. Seen a quail before? Now remember, they're traveling on foot with camels. They're not getting in their car, going to McDonald's or the drive-thru. They are walking, from old elderly to young children. They are walking. It's way different than today. The next morning, the ground glistened with fresh dew. Even after the sun dried up the dew, there was still something covering the ground. It looked like bread had rained down from heaven. It was manna. The manna looked like tiny seeds and tasted just like bread. The people ate and ate. Every day God sent manna and quail so that the people had food to eat. The Israelites kept traveling toward the place God had promised. After a while, they ran out of water. Even though God had given them food when they were hungry, the people still complained. "My mouth feels dry like a desert," sobbed a child. The people were thirsty. This time, God told Moses to hit a rock with his staff. When he did, water gushed out of the rock. The people had more than enough to drink. God gave food and water to the Israelites every day. God took care of the people, just like God promised. So this is kind of what the manna, little white, and then here they're celebrating when Moses hit the rock with his staff. Along the way, they traveled in the wilderness, wondering. They were going into places, boys and girls, that they had never been. And they were trusting purely the words that God had told Moses. And they were trusting it, and they were wondering, how are we supposed to trust something that we can't see, and there's no food and there's no water? But God said, I will provide to you. God always gives us, boys and girls, what we need. Not always what we want, but what we need. We may want a shiny new bike for Christmas. We may want the latest pair of shoes. But God gives us what we need. And when you get things that you need, you feel so much more fulfilled than just something that you want that you may get sick of after just a few times. How many of you have ever asked for something for Christmas? You're like, oh my gosh, it's all over the TV. It's the latest toy. Like it is, oh my goodness, going to be the coolest thing. Mom, I need that toy because you know what? All my friends have it. And you get it. And it's nothing like what you thought it would be. And so after a day or two, maybe a month, you set that toy aside. And it wasn't everything that you had. Now maybe some of you have, instead of getting a gift, have gotten an experience. And it's time with someone that matters with you. Maybe it's time with a friend that you haven't seen in a while. That time can be just as important and what you need than something material. Because God, boys and girls, always, always, always provides for you what you need. Maybe not always in what you want. And he says, trust me. These are my promises to you. And if you follow my promises, what are God's promises? That's kind of the next thing. Instead of a Bible verse, we're going to go into the 10 Commandments. And we're going to work on memorizing those. And those, how many of you have rules at your house? How many of you have rules at your house? Anybody have a rule? Do you have to make your bed? Do you have to help clean up the toys? Maybe do you get to watch movies all night? Lots of different rules. God's rules, the 10 Commandments, were set in place so that we would know how he wants us to live, so that we would get along with others and live a life that he desires and is right, and a life that we can be proud of. The 10 Commandments. The Israelites were on their way to the land of God had promised them. It was a long way. With God watching over them, the men, the women, and children walked and walked and walked over the hot, dry land. When they got tired and needed rest, they would set up tents and camp under the stars. When they were camping at the bottom of a mountain called Mount Sinai, something incredible happened. On the morning of the third day that they were there, a dark cloud covered the mountain. Crash! Boom! Bang! Lightning and thunder filled the sky. The people were afraid. Suddenly, the voice of God called Moses. God asked Moses to climb to the top of the mountain. So Moses, grabbing his walking stick, and he started climbing up, up, and up. When he got to the top of the mountain, God spoke. God said, Moses, listen up. I have important rules for you and the people to live by. You can turn to this list to know how to love God and each other. Do your best to follow this list. It won't be easy, but I am with you and I love you. Then God gave Moses a list of 10 special rules called the Commandments. They were, I am God, the only God. Honor me above all other things and people. Always keep God number one. There are no other gods for you, only me. My name is special. Don't use it with bad words or mean talk. Number 4, take a day of rest each week. Call it the Sabbath and make it a special day for God. Show your mom and dad and others who take care of you love and respect. Respect others. Don't hurt others with your words or your actions. If you get married, you must be loyal to your husband or wife. Don't take things that aren't yours. Tell only the truth about your family, friends, and even those you don't know. Be happy with what you have. Don't wish for things that other people have. Now, some of you have probably heard these and have heard them maybe in a little different words, but maybe you've heard them even at school. Maybe that's a rule at school or a rule at home. And these rules don't take things that aren't yours. So if you see your sister's new skateboard or bike or a favorite book of hers, you don't go take it if it's not yours. As tempting as it is, just don't take things that aren't yours. And so we are already practicing these at home in little steps and at school. But these rules are not just there to say, just like at home. The rules aren't just there, boys and girls, just because us parents want to be the boss. Trust me, there's days I'd love to not be the boss. It's not about being the boss. The rules are there so that we know boundaries, we can get along, respect each other, and keep a positive, loving environment for our families and for our friends at school. That's why rules are there. Rules are not meant to be unfair. Rules are there to make sure that everyone is safe and that everyone knows boundaries. And that's the 10 Commandments with God. He wants us to know how we should love Him and show Him. We treat others the way we want to be treated. We love Him and only Him. We don't use His name in a bad way. You honor your mother and father so that we all can get along. And God, boys and girls, will always give us help and the things that we need. Just not always the things that we think we need, but what we truly need, not what we want. And those rules, sometimes it's hard. Like, for me, the hardest thing, I like chocolate. And sometimes, like, at our house, sometimes the girls will be really, really hungry. And then they'll sneak a piece of candy, and then they're not as hungry. Well, if there's a piece of chocolate sitting out, boys and girls, it is really hard for me not to eat that piece of chocolate before supper. Even though I'm a parent, even though I'm an adult, and we as a family set rules, I can't take that piece of chocolate. Because I need to show how to also follow rules. I also need to say, if I'm going to say this, then I do this. And so, it's so hard not to eat the piece of chocolate. But I do it. And that's just a little thing, and we can have one after supper. Then there's times, like here's one. So today we kind of had a wandering day. We went wandering as a family, which doesn't always happen. And we came home and we decided we had ate a bigger lunch and we were cutting up apples, making filling for apple pies, and it was all of us and we were having fun. And nobody was really that hungry. And so we always try to have a good healthy supper. We decided to do kind of a different kind of supper. We ended up having cheesecake with homemade apple pie filling. And it was a memory. It was more than it's supper. You should eat meat, potatoes, and vegetables. It was, we had been wondering and enjoying everything God has given. We were down in the river bottom and it was just beautiful and it was such a fun day. And those memories of the wandering, no matter when the wind picked up and it was cold and we were freezing, it was for such a short time. And the laughs that we shared, that we decided to have kind of a funny supper. Now, I wish I would have had a camera because the look on their faces when I said we had to have either ice cream, something fun for supper, because nobody was really that hungry because we had ate a later lunch. And it was a day, boys and girls, that we will always remember. God knew today that our family needed a time of us for us 6 to actually go out and wander. When Rick's not working, when the kids aren't in school, we needed this. We didn't go far, but God sometimes gives us things, boys and girls, that we don't even know that we need. And when we get them, and at first it's like, do I need this? Do I want this? When He gives you what you need, you feel filled in more ways than you ever can imagine. It will fulfill you more than the latest toy at Christmas. It's just amazing. And we need to remember that God's people wandered for a very long time in the wilderness where it is hot. And they complained, and we complain. But God never leaves us. He gives us what we need when we need it. He gave them when they were hungry. He gave them quail and manna. And when they started complaining that they were thirsty, He told Moses, take your staff and break that rock. And they had enough water to drink for a very long time. And when they were wandering from a place that by no means was perfect, but it was all that they've known. Could you imagine God coming in and saying, pack your bags tonight, only take what you can carry, and you're going to walk. You're going to walk to the place that I promise you is right for you. Could you imagine, walking that far? And they did it. Yes, they complained, but God was there every step of the way. And that's why He took Moses to the top of that mountain and said, these are the rules that I want you to live by. They're not easy, boys and girls. And you know what? Sometimes we're going to make mistakes. But it's asking God for forgiveness and changing and doing the best we can to live up to these rules and promises that He made for us. Living a life that He wants to so we can all get along. We are all special. God put us all here on purpose for a purpose. And we need to trust in Him as hard as it is every step of the way. I know that if He came to my house, I live out in the country and I'm really hoping that there's no skunks outside my tent right now. Or a cat somewhere. If He came to my house and said, pack up, follow me, especially as we approach winter, I would be nervous, but I would do it because I know, boys and girls, that what God has in store for me is so much better than I could have ever imagined. And we need to trust that. You know, when they started wandering, how many of you have ever been in a corn maze or today we were in a hay maze, never have been in one of those, or have done a maze on paper? You know, the goal is you start here, but there's all these different ways to take until you get out. There's mirror mazes. When they started wandering and on foot and, you know, with simple shelters and just the simple clothes on their back, it had to have felt like they were in a maze. But boys and girls, every time that God was there for them and made sure they were fed, had water, and gave them those promises and said, trust me, I am always here, that had to be a great, great feeling. And so sometimes when we're wandering, whether it be outside, looking at the change in the weather, always look for God in those moments. And trust that He's working with it, and He is always there right next to you. Cherish those moments. Trust in Him, because He will always give you what you need, not always what we want. And so this week, I'm not going to have you print anything out. I have some stuff that's going to be coming to you for next week, and it'll all be printed for you. We're going to do some cooking and stuff, so do some fun things next week with this. All I want you to do this week is on your own, either in your house or on paper, or think of a time, draw a maze and see if someone can complete it. And I want you to think of it as wandering, and what your dream maze, or what would be when you wander, what are things you look for. If you build a maze, or if you've been to a maze, let me know, and what your feelings were when you were inside that maze. I was in a maze out in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and it was mirrors. I am very claustrophobic, so I don't like small spaces, and I could not get out of this maze that my 3-year-old got out of. I'm not gonna lie, I got very, very nervous. Very nervous. And I took a breath and I asked for help, and my family came and helped me out. But I have to believe that God was with me even in that moment. That moment of wandering in this maze, wondering, what if I don't get out? What if I just keep taking the wrong turn? And if we take wrong turns, if we mess up, or if we are a little more sassy to mom and dad, maybe not nicest to our brother or sister, God will forgive us, boys and girls. It's just that we have to try our best. That's what God asks. Try our best, and that even when we don't, He will forgive us. But do our best. Ask for help when we need it. And never forget, He will give you what you need, always. Because you were put here on purpose, for a purpose, by God Himself. So, like I said, just think of a maze and what it was like. And for next week, I want you to start to think of some things that, food-wise, that go together. So, maybe I'll be out in the tent in the wilderness. Maybe it'll be daytime, so it's not so spooky, because I'm kind of out here by myself. So I can imagine at least all those people had each other. But it's also at the same time so peaceful. Out here, I hear tractors going in the background. I hear the river running behind my house. And God is so wonderful, boys and girls. Always, if you get the chance to wander, take the time and look around God's world, because it is truly beautiful, especially now. So I hope you have a great week. We will continue to go over the 10 Commandments. That'll be another thing in your packet. So there's nothing to print this week. We'll be learning the 10 Commandments and working on memorizing them, as that's something that's part of the curriculum this year. And I look forward to next week with you and sharing more adventures and stories of God and how amazing He is. I hope you've had a great MEA weekend, even though it got a little cold and windy. And I hope you have a fabulous week. And think of some rules that you have at home. And let's see this week if we can do a really good job and surprise our parents by doing some of the things that they want us to do without even asking. Let's see how many we can do. So, have a fabulous rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye.